In the not-so-distant past, Lazy Squire Games contacted me with a request to paint a miniature from their board game Stormsunder. Hence the box. And the inevitable fact that this video is sponsored by Lazy Squire Games. Stormsunder being a game of most certain adventure heroes' inevitable quests not to walk around with boxes in slow motion, but preferably fighting monsters in exotic and most probably unnerving locations. The creators of Stormsunder being obviously proud of the sculpts and thus the actual PVC plastic miniatures that come with the board game, rightly so I must add, did have one conundrum. There's no paint on the miniatures. Displaying the quality of their miniatures is after all better done with paint on. Fortunately, I didn't have to paint every single miniature for every Stormsunder box. A ridiculously ineffective way of getting games out to customers. Only one will pass under my brush. But this does mean that I've found my way into a commission-type situation. Better than a hostage situation, but nerve-wracking nonetheless. The specifications paint one really good was liberatingly loose, but the underlying feeling of need to impress was growing at the same rate as Elon Musk's fortune, on a good day, without spontaneous Twitter stuff. Anyway, I kept looking at the miniatures, deciding on which one to paint. First in favor of the awesome Vanessa, but then ultimately deciding on FeilHeim. Not only a lovely sculpt, but just the sheer size was inviting. But for the first time in quite a while, I was at a loss of how to paint this intimidating Viking-inspired fellow. While procrastinating, I mean searching for inspiration on Instagram, this showed up. And this affected my nervous disposition in the same way as previously discussed fortunes would if Elon went public with the fact that SpaceX now has made first contact with the friendly alien species holding the secrets to fusion power. But then, things in fact turned round. If Mr. Giraldez is doing the same thing as I, well, then this mini is already being painted real well. And if I screw up, on the whole, that won't really matter as much. I think this is something for me to consider and remember. Whatever mini I've got in my hand, somewhere in the world, someone else has probably painted it real well. So the point of me painting it is to have fun and just do what I feel like. The only one I might necessarily need to impress is myself. And with that settled, ideas of how to paint grew at the same rate as my nerves recovered. I decided to challenge myself. Toying with the idea that FeilHeim here is in fact in a most certainly unnerving location, fighting monsters of course, but maybe it's dark. He's dimly lit by moonlight or a magic-y dungeon glow, or distant lightning lit by a storm. And he's passing by a source of fire, the remains of a burning building, flowing lava, or just plain old orange magic-y stuff. You would have seen the effect, using cold and warm light on opposite sides, a very pleasing effect that I have never accomplished before. Painting light is often referred to as OSL, object source lighting, this often said with a slight nervous voicing. I've done some smaller attempts, glowing eyes, magic-y items or weaponry to varying degrees of success, painting them to look like they glow. But never have I painted an entire miniature in a specifically lit setting. My main obstacle is that I find it really difficult to figure out how the light would act and react. What parts are lit? What parts are not? How bright? How dark? What happens when the light hits different types of surfaces? Inspired by a video I recently saw made by Scott, Miniac, where he photographed a miniature that he had covered in bright metallic paint, and then lit as if it was standing on a field under a cloudy sky, all to get a reference on how to then progress with painting the same miniature with a non-metallic metal technique. I figured I could do something similar, but put my FeilHeim in a light that looks like what I want to paint. Take a picture and use that as a reference for my OSL. I used the light from my kitchen window, finding a spot on the table where the light hit the miniature from the side. This would be my distant lightning Stormsunder, storm. And then a small torch that I angled until a pleasing glowing lava flow effect was evident. Photographing the mini on all four sides, inevitably with my fancy camera, but a phone camera would do, I edited together all 4 photographs onto one sheet and printed it out. And hey presto, here was my OSL light map. Now all I had to do was put paint on there and roughly match the light map. Yeah. These miniatures, they are, by the way, a multitude of miniatures that come with Stormsunder. If you're curious about the game itself or the miniatures, there is still, as of this video's release, a late pledge on Kickstarter. Links down below in the description. The minis are PVC plastic with a great level of detail. Being gameable out of the box, as in no assembly needed, means that they are molded in one go. This leads to mold lines here and there, something I'm a bit picky with. But taking into account the time saved on assembly and not needing to do any basing, I don't mind the time spent. I'm not sure if a release agent is used when molding miniatures like this, but to be on the safe side, I washed the mini in lukewarm water and some washing up liquid before priming. I decided early on with this project to not use my airbrush for anything but priming. Often when it comes to OSL, I get the question if one needs an airbrush. And I mean, it probably would have made my life easier, but I wanted to see if I could do without. Starting out with the darkest colors, a dark blue for the cold storm lit side, a dark reddish brown for the side lit by fire, and a dark grey for where they meet in the middle, and anywhere not hit by either light. The first passes of paint were very sketch-like, paying no regard to specific details. The paint is diluted, and with the black base coat everything just tones down a lot once dry. After this first sloppy sketch, I just made sure I was getting paint pretty much everywhere except for the absolute recesses of the areas not hit by either light. Constantly referring to my sketch, trying to decipher if the light should be blue, brown or neutral. I did want to get some neutral in, even though it might be a bit unrealistic, but settling for just blue and brown in the end would be a very monochrome feeling. Or is that duochrome? Anyway, I did, however, try and alter some of the imagined neutral colors. I imagined FeilHeim here to have a reddish beard, but what would that look like in an environment such as this? Magenta-ish, perhaps? Same for his skirt thing. Green felt like a suitable color, but a green that would live in this cavernous, stormy world. With the darkest colors sketched out, I started to highlight, constantly not only referencing my image, but trying to think of highlighting areas that would be facing the source of light. Normally on regular miniatures this would be areas facing upwards towards the sky, but not here. Looking at the miniature from the same angle as the imagined source of light and just keep on stabbing that area with paint was the overall battle plan. Also, to not try and finish either side completely, instead gradually working up the entire miniature, jumping back and forth between the cold, warm and neutral sides. Painting smaller and smaller areas with brighter paints and more detailed brushwork, hiding the sloppy sketches with more and more precise-ish strokes. This all took some time, so I thought I'd talk a little more about Stormsunder, to get an idea of what Mr. FeilHeim here is up to when at work. With the arrival of the storm, a new world order has risen, shattering the relative peace once enjoyed by the people of the Inali Desert and its surrounding regions. Cantarak was decimated by demons, and Retan was swallowed by the desert, its people never seen again. Tarpit fell to the vampires, and Hotem-Ra, mad pharaoh of Mokota, has returned with an army of dead at his command. In the face of these new threats, a party of heroes, some in name only, must choose to end the storm or rule in its cruel wake. Regarding the miniatures, and yes, they are plenty, I must say they do look nice, and I'm not saying this just because I got sent a box. I also enjoy how scale has been played around with. There are some huge monsters with smaller minions, heroes of varying sizes, all very detailed. I can imagine this being a pretty fun sight on the table. On that note, if one fancies the look of these minis, but maybe another type of game setting, Lazy Squire Games have another game called Wild Ascent, featuring the same quality miniatures. A link to Wild Ascent is also down in the description. Back to FeilHeim. My biggest challenge with the blue and the orange, red, well, one of the challenges, was relieving them of dullness. Having the majority of the parts of this miniature painted in the one color did sometimes give a flat sensation when talking about color. In the end, I think the warm side consisted of brown, red, orange, magenta, orange again, and so on. The blue was the base blue, a grayer blue, a more turquoise blue, the original blue again. Not only to get depth, but also to get a sense of coherency. That feeling that the two parts, the two lights, the blue and the warm, affect each other somewhat. My final layer of highlights was a white. I tried to imagine that certain materials would reflect light differently. Anything metallic would give a brighter reflection, same with hair, whereas cloth or leather would be slightly duller. So anything imagined reflective got white highlights. And I actually did the same with the warm side, this mainly to give me a surface that I then could go on and paint some orange over. The white underneath really helped the orange along to shout "orange" just a bit more. My final steps after finishing off the base and cleaning up a few obvious mistakes here and there were some finishing touches of a light yellow on the warm side. Same here, only going for the part that would most probably reflect light more. Painting this miniature was something completely new for me, not only because of the reason why it was in my hand, but painting something in an ambient setting like this. And painting something as dark as this. I really wanted the mystery, the dark shaded places to carry through and not end up boring. The magenta beard, grey axe blade and green skirt thing might be a bit out of place, but the need for just a few other focus points than the two major blobs of cold and warm light was for me a necessity. I had tremendous fun painting this miniature. I don't think I could have pulled it off without my light map. Never did I really have to question if a certain part of the mini was supposed to be bright or dark. Instead, I could concentrate on colors and blends. In a way, I kind of feel like I've been cheating, and that, in the end, is a good thing. I'd like to end with a thank you to Lazy Squire Games for supporting creators like myself. Please do go ahead and check out Stormsunder, or Wild Ascent for that matter. Also, a humble thank you to my patrons. I don't thank you enough. Now please do consider trying out some OSL, and do please bring a cheaty light map.